First of all, thank you a lot to Dr. Jiraroth Sukolrat for being our speaker today. As you saw, the event of this afternoon, the webinar of this afternoon is related to Landbridge, the next Regional Maritime Center, the connection between the Andaman and Gulf of Thailand. Today, we are talking about a topic that probably many of you have heard in the past, but today we have a distinguished guest. With us, we have Dr. Jiraroth Sukolrat, Director of the Bureau of Regional Transport and Traffic System Promotion and the Office of Transport and Traffic Policy and Planning of the Ministry of Transport of Thailand. Today, we are very pleased to have him with us. My name is Michele Tomea of the Thai Italian Chamber of Commerce, located in Bangkok. The topic of today is linked to a series of webinars that we are planning to do together with several partners related to the challenge of logistics, especially right now that we're talking in a pandemic situation that many countries are trying to managing. It's very important also to have a right connection with the right partners and institutions. Before we start, I would like to show a very brief introduction about the Thai Italian Chamber of Commerce for those companies connected that don't know as much. Just a very quick video for the attendees.
To the Thai Italian Chamber of Commerce. The Thai Italian Chamber of Commerce, or in short, TICC, have been established in Thailand for almost 40 years. We are an independent, private, non-profit organization of Italian and Thai businessmen and professionals, duly constituted and registered in accordance with legislative regulations in Thailand and fully recognized by the Ministry of Economic Development in Italy. The TICC is also a member of the Association of Italian Chambers Abroad, the Joint Foreign Chambers of Commerce in Thailand, and the European Association for Business and Commerce. The TICC promotes its role as a representative of the local business community, and more concretely, as a meeting point for business affairs between Italy and Thailand. The Chamber has various objectives, all of which share the purpose of developing the cooperation and respect in the business environment. As part of the TICC, you will have access to exclusive services and the opportunity to participate in special activities reserved only to members. Members of the TICC are mostly Italian or Thai businesses, professionals, entrepreneurs, associations, and institutions. As a Chamber of Commerce, we are very open to collaboration opportunities, and you're more than welcome to contact our team for possible cooperation. You can find our contact details in our website listed here, or call 02-255-8695. Thank you very much for your attention, and we're looking forward to hearing from you.
We can start. I will leave our virtual floor to Dr. Jiraroth Sukolrat, and thank you a lot for being with us this afternoon.
Okay. Good afternoon, participants. First of all, I would like to thank the Thai Italian Chambers of Commerce, or the TICC, to conduct this event and to invite me as a speaker. And also, I would like to thank all of the participants to attend this event. Okay, my name is Dr. Jiraroth Sukolrat. I am a director of Bureau of Regional Transport and Traffic System Promotion, Office of Transport and Traffic Policy and Planning, or OTP. Okay, I'm pleased to be here with you for our next 1-hour session on Landbridge projects. Okay, before we start our presentations, I'm going to share with you on some brief information on what we are doing and what the government of Thailand are planning for the Landbridge projects on this video. Okay, please.
General Prayut Chan-o-cha's government is committed to developing transportation infrastructure nationwide to provide integrated links among land, rail, water, and air transport networks for boosting the national economy and public well-being. In response to the government policy, Mr. Saksayam Chidchop, Minister of Transport, has proactively expedited development of transportation infrastructure and services with a focus on multimodal linkage. An important venture is the Chumpon Ranong Land Bridge project linking the Gulf of Thailand and the Andaman Sea. The Strait of Malacca is one of the most important shipping lanes in the world. It serves 100,000 vessels annually, and the number of anticipated to rise to 400,000 in the next 30 years. This will result in traffic congestion and shipment delay. In addition, it is a circuation route. The Chumpon Ranong Land Bridge project will thus be of great benefits to Thailand's maritime trade. Given the strategic advantages of Thailand's location at the heart of the Indo-Chinese Peninsula, the development of a commercial port on the Andaman coast with an efficient link to the Gulf of Thailand will provide a shorter trade route connecting the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. The Minister of Transport has thus assigned the Office of Transport and Traffic Policy and Planning to conduct a feasibility study on transportation infrastructure development to boost the Southern Economic Corridor and promote linkage between the Gulf of Thailand and the Andaman Sea. In this context, leading consulting companies have been employed to conduct the study, generate preliminary design, assess environmental impact, and analyze the business development model. The tasks are slated for completion in 2022. The project will involve upgrading of Ranong Port on the Andaman coast and construction of Chumpon Port on the Gulf of Thailand. These two smart deep-sea ports will adopt a port automation system and operate in an environmentally friendly manner. To provide seamless links between both ports, a motorway and a double-track railway will be constructed to run parallel with each other in line with the MR-MAP strategy to minimize impact from land expropriation. Concomitantly, an oil pipeline from the Andaman coast of the Gulf of Thailand will be developed to facilitate efficient delivery of oil from the Middle East to the Far East. To ensure optimum project management efficiency, the Ministry of Transport will encourage experienced private investors to participate in the project development. Public hearings will also be organized throughout the project's duration. This land bridge project will promote Thailand as an intercontinental shipment and cargo exchange gateway. It will serve as a new trade lane, linking the Indian and the Pacific Oceans with reduced shipment time. As such, the project will attract investors from all over the world, stimulate the national economy, create employment opportunities, and generate income. It will position Thailand as the regional hub for maritime trade.
Okay, that's all about the brief introductions of the land bridge projects. First of all, I need to clarify a little bit of these projects. The land bridge project is now under feasibility study, which has started on March earlier this year, and it's aimed to be finished within 30-month periods. It means that from March until now, we have already started for 4 months already, and we have starting to develop the strategies and also the looking at the location of where the deep sea port on 2 sites will be located. And then after that, we are going to develop the conceptual designs and also the following studies on the EIA or EHIA. And within the first 15 months, it will be used on the formulation of the strategic plans, the conceptual designs, the EHIA study, as I mentioned, and also really important things that we have to do the market soundings why in the last 15 months, we will use for development of the business models, because the government of Thailand, Ministry of Transport, aim this project to be one of the PPP projects. So we have to develop how could the business of this project to be used, how much of the public sectors to be involved in these projects, and how the private sector can get involved in these projects. Okay, and as you may know that the Landbridge project is one of the priority list of the government flagship projects. Then it is considered to be one mega project to be support the country's economy and to promote both EEC, as you may know that the government policy has already promoted the Eastern Economic Corridors, which is in eastern region of Thailand. And the future will have the Southern Economic Corridors, which some part of southern of Thailand will be used as the new economic corridors. So the session today, I'm going to call this like a discussion forum instead of giving the information of this. It is the kind of discussion between the OTP and all of you who have, I think you have more experiences on the import, export, and also the marine shipments. So on our OTP side, I will share the information and the progress of the study. And I would like also to have the feedback from you as one of stakeholders of this project. This is to shape the Landbridge project to become reality. Okay, the topic of my presentation today, I'm going to cover about 4 areas. First, I will give the introduction of the Thailand's Landbridge projects on how government thinks and what is behind the reason that we are going to promote these projects. And next, I will cover the elements that we need to have on these projects. And also it to be followed by the connectivities between existing EEC projects and the Landbridge projects and the future of SEC, the Southern Economic Corridors. And finally, I will show some information on the development strategies of the Landbridge projects. And then we can discuss further for the future of the Landbridge projects. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I will start with the introduction of the Thailand Landbridge projects. Okay, on this slide, I'm going to present the fact that the international freight, which have been transported throughout the world, you can see from the pictures, normally the freights are divided into 4 modes of transportation, namely sea, rail, road, and air transport. Among of them, sea freight take up about 80% of international freights around the world, which approximately 11.1 billion tons per year due to its low cost, and there is no border regulations when the ships enter the international waters. The products transport in sea freight can be divided into 3 types, and you may know it already, namely containers consume about 16% or about 1.8 million tons per year. Next is dry cargo, which is the highest portions. It takes up about 55% or 6.1 billion tons per year. And tanker, which is about 29% or about 3.2 billion tons per year, transporting of crude oils and refined oils in the world. Okay, the next slide. The next slide will show the container transport volume per year. We found that the volume of all worldwide shipping routes is approximately 151.9 million TEUs per year. Most of this has been running along the main line east-west, which is approximated up to 59.4 million TEUs, comprising Asia-Europe, which is about 24.7 million, Trans-Pacific, about 26.8 million, and transatlantic about 7.8 million. One of our concerns is that in Asia-Europe lies the transport from Asia to Europe. You can see from the dotted area. In the Asia to Europe, which is the westbound traffic, it takes up to 7.5 million TEUs per year. And on the other hand, from European country back to Asia is about 7.2 million TEUs per year. So it is to be considered that this route is really important to connect the producers, which is on the right-hand side from China, Japan, and Korea, to be linkage with the left-hand side, which is European country, including Middle East, African country, and also India. So this linkage is very important producer-consumer linkage in the global supply chain. Okay, and this slide will show one of the important choke points in the sea freight transport, which is Malacca Strait. When we look at the oil transport volume in 2016 data from the U.S. Energy Information Administration, or the EIA, in this picture, it shows that among oil productions in Middle East, transport through the Strait of Hormuz, about 19 million barrels per day. The amount of oil through the Strait of Malacca is approximately about 16 million barrels per day, which is really huge amount that the oil has been transferred from the Middle East through the Far East Asia through the Malacca Strait. So the main consumer are lying in Far East Asia, which including China, Japan, Korea, which take up about 80% of those amounts. So this underlies the importance of the Strait of Malacca as the prime location of the sea freight transport. Okay, and the next question is where that crude oils and the oil products goes, right? So if you look at these pictures, the behavior of crude oils and the oil products transport will use the super tankers, which is the VLCC or ULCC type, passing through the Strait of Malacca and discharging some products in Singapore ports and distribute to Myanmar, Thailand, and Vietnam using smaller ships. Then the supertanker will further navigate through major discharging ports in China, in Korea, and in Japan. It means that some oils and oil products distributed into Southeast Asian countries are offloaded in Singapore port. So this is one opportunity that the Landbridge project can be developed the strategy for our projects in the futures. Okay, as I mentioned earlier, the major discharging points are in China, in Korea, and in Japan by supertanker through Malacca Strait. But some portion consumed in Southeast Asian countries has been discharged in Singapore. Based on the record from the EIA agency, Singapore and Malaysia import those crude oil approximately 1.4 million barrels per day. And Singapore and Malaysia refine them before export as petroleum product to other countries in the regions. So this made Singapore as an important center of the refining of crude oil, oil storage, and transportation of crude oils and its product. Although Singapore does not produce the crude oil itself, but Singapore is one of the major stakeholders to control the refineries and also to control the discharging of the oil and the crude oil in these regions. Okay, and I took these pictures from the marinevesseltraffic.com. You can see that with the importance of Strait of Malacca and Singapore port, the ship traffic volume in Malacca Strait has been increased more and more. Based on the records from the Department Peninsula of Malaysia, the number of vessels transit through Malacca Strait has been as high as 85,000 vessels per year in 2017. It is also reported that the number of tankers of about 20,000 vessels per year passing through the Strait of Malacca. And if you see on the left-hand side of the graph, the container ships of about 25,000 vessels and the bulk carrier of about 15,000 vessels per year are also recorded to have transit through Malacca Strait. Although it might be some decrease during COVID-19 pandemic, but it was just temporarily. And it is estimated that within next 10 years, the number of vessels in Malacca Strait will reach the geographical capacity of the Malacca Strait. And you can see from the presentation how congestion in the strait, showing in the red colors, which is the most congestion started when the vessel enter the Strait of Malacca and when they enter the major ports lying in the strait like Klang Port or Tanjung Pelepas Port and also the Singapore ports. Those are the reasons why we need to develop the land bridge project, which can be summarized in this page. Okay, we start with the importance of having the land bridge project in the South Thailand. It can be concluded in 3 advantages. Firstly, the advantage of the strategic geographical locations of Thailand, because Thailand is in the center of Southeast Asian regions. Thailand is the gateway for the transportations and exchange for other countries in this region, including southern China. And it can be the channel for exchange of goods between the other continents of the world. Secondly, the advantage of the strategic location of the land bridge projects. The land bridge can reduce the time and the distance of transportations, so it can save transportation costs, avoid the traffic congestion in the Strait of Malacca, and also there's a tendency to incentivize transport operators and investors to take advantage of this route. It can be one of the diversion of the existing sea route on east-west mainline sea freight transportation that I mentioned earlier. And finally, the advantage of the strategic oil shippings in these regions, as we discussed earlier, the amount of oil and natural gas transmitted through the Strait of Malacca is about 15 to 18% of the volume traded worldwide. Then, the density of shipping through the Strait of Malacca will give a chance for the project development to perform Thailand as an oil and natural gas transportation hub. One of the main objectives of the land bridge project, I assure that it is not the competitor to the existing ports like Singapore port, but it will be used as the alternative route to the Malacca Strait for relieving the congestion, and we consider this project as a partner to the existing route and the stakeholders. Okay, in the first part, I have already covered the fact and the reason and the necessity of the development of the land bridge projects. Next, I'm going to present the elements that the land bridge need to have for the projects. Okay, this slide will show the roles of the land bridge that we are going to promote and develop in our projects. Okay, based on the fact that many types of products transported through Malacca Strait and the fact that many products transport using Thailand's inland facilities, including the road transport, the rail transport, or coastal area for the sea transport. We then look at the land bridge project should support for 3 roles, namely oil bridge, the transshipment, and the assembly. Let's start with the first one, the oil bridge. the land bridge can be an alternative route to the transport of crude oil and also refined oils and natural gas by shipping from the state of Hormuz, which is in the Middle East, Asia, to Reginal port, which is the port on the Andaman coast, and then pass through the facility in the land bridge via pipeline through Chumpon port, which is on the Gulf of Thailand, and then it can ship to China, who is the main importer, and also to other importers in the regions, namely Myanmar, Thailand, Cambodia, or Vietnam. And also, the next row of the land bridge, it will be used as the transshipment port, because both ports in Gulf of Thailand and all the Andaman coast, it can be act as an alternative to the transshipment of the cargo between the Indian Oceans and the Pacific Oceans by rail and road, which will be in the combination of these projects. Okay, and finally, the role of the land bridge will be used as the assembly areas. The project should develop free economic zones to attract the investors to develop the industry behind those two ports in order to promote the land bridge and increase the competitiveness of the economy in the southern Thailand regions. So not only the products which be generated inside Thailand, we are looking for the product which is generated outside Thailand. For example, from China, from Japan, from Korea, which need the assembly. They can take those ingredients to put into the land bridge and doing the assembly in the land bridge area and then export to European country, through Indian, and also to African country using the Western Gateway in Reginal port. Okay, and once we have already starting with the rows of the land bridge, then there are many compositions that will be required in these areas. So from those rows that we are talking about, the oil bridge, the assembly ports, and also the transshipment ports, then we are now clarify what are the compositions which is required in the land bridge projects. First of all, the most important compositions are deep sea ports in both Gulf of Thailand, which is the east coast, or we call the Chumpon port in this slide, and also another port, which is on the Andaman port, what we call Reginal port in this slide. So we aim to have about 16 meters water depth of the seaport, because we are thinking of the deep sea port in those two areas to accommodate about 6,000 to 8,000 TEUs container ships to use the ports. Then both ports are designed to be automation ports to reduce time of the handling as a transshipment purpose. And how could we connect those two ports together? It will be connected by motorways, railways, and also pipelines. And the linkage between the ports will be the shortest route in order to reduce the transportation times connecting those two ports together. And once we have the transport infrastructures, there will be activities in the hinterland area behind the port to accommodate distribution centers, for example, the transshipment facilities, tank farms, and assembly facilities on those ports. So these combinations will promote the land use in the southern economic corridors to generate commercial areas such as office buildings, commercial purpose buildings, hotel, and so on. And also, the land will be developed to be residential areas for housings, condominiums, and relating apartments. And it will attract the light industry, such as assemblies, automotives, food and logistic activities. And the service industry will be developed in the area, including restaurants, hospitals, entertainment, and retail parks. Okay, as I mentioned earlier, now we are under the feasibility studies of the projects, the Landbridge projects. Then our scope of the study will be on this slide. So this is during the MOT feasibility studies, which is needed to be developed, the strategies, the conceptual designs, and importantly, the public participations. The scope of these studies includes 5 parts in this slide. And I would like to underline again that we have just started this project for 4 months already. Now we are on the preparation of the strategies. We are looking at how could this Landbridge to be promoted, and we are about on the gathering information from the stakeholders to develop the strategies to make it reality, and also on the process of the selections of the ports. So let me cover all of the part of the study that we are working on it. Okay, the first part, we will cover the selection of the project site and the port selection, which to consider the suitability of the environment or environmental friendly society and the economies. Also, we're looking at the possibility in terms of the engineering, because we need to locate the most suitable areas to be used as a port. Okay, and we have to think about the reasonable investment value, because it will be developed as the PPP, public-private participation projects. So the investment cost, it has to be to be good enough for the private partnerships, for the investor around the world to be invest in these projects. And also, we have to be inconsistent with the global sea routes to reach the objective of the responsive to commercial strategies of the country and the world. And the second part of the study will be on the comparative of the project option, because you may know that there is another project, what we call Thai canals, which will be another project site which can be used as the Landbridge. So we have to we have to compare between Landbridge and the Thai canals projects and other options, and also with the best practice internationally. Once we have already located the site of the port, the conceptual design for the port will be conducted. And there must be enough detail to be able to decide for using as the bidding document, while the BOQ will be prepared to estimate the construction cost before we are going to have the market soundings to see how much interested for the global investor to join in these projects. And another aim of this project is about on the study on the business models of the PPP investment alternatives. To answer the questions such as the possibility of the PPP with pros and cons, the advantages and the disadvantages. And also the PPP, either the corridor or split into section port, rail, pipeline, and motorway. Should it be bunched up into one big project, or should it be separated into each project, which looking at port individually, rail individually, pipelines individually, or motorway individually? And also to answer the questions of the investor option comparison, and also what does the government prepare for, how much, in which section that the government need to be subsidized, or in which section that the government has to be invested in. And also we are going to develop the guideline for finding money sources? And is there any options? So it can be PPP or it can be the SPV to gather the money or the incomes for the development or invest in the projects. And also we have to look about what is the life cycle cost and optimize the options that we are going to generate it in the business model study, and also the driving plan for the projects. Then we are going to offer the alternatives to maximize the benefits to the country and also to maximize the benefit for the investors. And finally, one of the most important objectives is the public participations, which has to be intensive throughout the project periods. The PPP, the PP units coordinate the public participation units. It had to be coordinated in the areas, and the information management unit has also have to give the information, the right information through the local people in the area to understand and to know the benefit that they are going to have when we have the projects in the futures. So again, this study is just in the early stage, which has already taken up for 4 months, which we are on formulating the strategy of the projects and the selection of the ports on both sides. So the next move will be on the public participation in the projected areas and the information gathering from the stakeholders, including shippings, liners, investor, and the local government. Okay, and next, I will move on to the connectivities between the EEC and the Landbridge projects. As we all understand that the government has promoted the EEC projects to be one of the driving engines of the Thailand's economies. So this section, I'm going to cover how the EEC can link with our Landbridge projects. Okay, during our study, we have already developed the rules and the guidelines for the development linkages in the sea transport. This is from domestically, from the EEC into 2 scenarios. How could we connect the EEC through the Landbridge projects? Okay, let's start with the scenario 1. So it is the domestic transport linkage through the Landbridge between Gulf of Thailand and the Andaman Sea through European country to Africa and also through Middle East to connect with the EEC. So with these scenarios, we need at least large post-Panamax, which is about 6,000 to 8,000 TEU ships to be it as a transshipment port. So it means that the products from the EEC will be transferred through Gulf of Thailand using post-Panamax ships through Chumphon port, and then using the Landbridge linkage to transfer those products through Reginal port, and then have a shipment through European country and Africa. So with these scenarios, so both ports, the one on eastern and another one on the western coast, require the draft of at least 14 meter depth, and the channel depth about 15.4 meters to accommodate those container ships. And the scenario 2, the domestic transport through Landbridge linkage between Gulf of Thailand and the Andaman Sea through BIMSTEC countries, which is the shorter route comparing to the European countries. So in these scenarios, the regional port transport among the regions are required in those 2 sites, and it can serve the Panamax size of the container ships, which accommodate about 3,000 to 4,000 TEUs and requires the draft of about 12.5 meters depth, and the channel depth is about 14 meters. So these roads will reduce the time of exports products from the EEC areas to Western destinations, such as European countries and BIMSTEC countries, instead of using existing route via the Malacca Strait. Okay, I will move on to the next slide. For the international transport, so the land bridge can serve for the purpose of, firstly, international transport through land bridge linkage between the Gulf of Thailand and the Andaman Sea. So it will be as the shortcut for the shipping routes linking between Indian Oceans, which is on the left-hand side, through the Pacific Ocean, which is on the right-hand side. And it can be an option for the regional transshipments. They can use this land bridge for the transshipments through other countries, which is within the regionals of the Southeast Asian countries. And secondly, the land bridge can be used as the maritime trade gateways, linking BIMSTEC and the EEC. And finally, it can be used as the maritime trade gateways for South China, which you may know that the government of Thailand, we are now promoting the constructions of the Thai-China Railways development projects, which is now during construction of linking Thailand to Laos border using the dual tracks railways. So it means that the products from southern China can be transported through the railroad, passing through Laos, and then they will have enter Thailand in Nong Khai in northeastern areas. And then they will use the railroads and existing infrastructure that the government of Thailand has developed to transport the products using railways from the northeastern areas, go down through the Ranong ports, and then to have the shipments through the ships, through transport to European countries, and also through Indian Ocean and BIMSTEC countries. Okay, when we develop the international transport like this, so for our scenario 1, as international transport through land bridge linkage between Gulf of Thailand and the Andaman Sea, so it will require at least the large post-Panamax size, which can accommodate about 6,000 to 8,000 TEUs. Container ships can be used as the transshipment port. So both ports require the draft at least 14 meters, and the channel depth is about 15.4 meters. And for scenario 2 and the 3, which will be used as maritime trade gateways linkage between BIMSTEC and the EEC, and also to be used as the gateway for southern China by Thai-China Railways development projects. So for these two scenarios, the port can be developed as the regional ports to transport within the regions, and it can serve the Panamax of about 3,000 to 4,000 TEUs. This requires a draft of about 12.5 meters depth and the channel depth about 14 meters. Then the benefits of the project development for the EEC connectivities can be summarized in these pictures. First of all, this project will reduce the cost and the time of the import and export between EEC and the Indian Ocean countries. And secondly, it can be used to reduce the amount of truck transport by using Thai Gulf Port as a distribution center between EEC and the southern provinces, which costs a lot of government budget for road maintenance. You may know that nowadays, all of mode of the transport that we use inland is road transport, and the maintenance cost will be bear on the government fiscal budget. When we promote this route, it means that the products from the EEC can be transferred to the southern regions either by waterways, also by the railroad. So it means that the cost that the government will be used for the road maintenance will be reduced. Then, when we change the mode of the transportation from land transport to rail transport and waterway transport, it also decreased the logistic cost by switching from land to sea or rail transport instead. Next, to encourage the utilization of the Andaman port, which is in Reginal, as the Andaman Trade Gateway of Thailand. So it means that Thailand itself will have a new gateways to connect the products either from Thailand itself, but also the products from regionals and also from the southern China can be used this port, which is on Andaman side in Reginal port, as another gateways to connect these regions to European countries and also to BIMSTEC countries. And finally, this Landbridge project is to support and promote EEC, which is in eastern areas, with the SEC in the southern areas as a planned government policies. Okay, I'm going to move on to the final part of these presentations, which I will cover how much that we are now, where are we now, and how much is the strategy that we have already developed for these projects. Okay, the early concept and the strategy that we are aligned for the land bridge will be as the export and import with the combinations of the containerized transshipment ports. So it means that the Thailand land bridge model will include the first one is the supply chain and the logistic integrations for the value-added service. For example, we are going to introduce the special economic zones, the free trade zones, and the financial economic zones. So it's not only the ports that we are going to develop, and also not only the land bridge, not only the motorways, railways, or the pipeline. We are aiming to develop the areas for the SEC, FTC, and the financial economic zone as well. Plus, we are going to have the cluster port business network. For example, we are going to have the facilities for transshipments, for the import-export, for the assembly facilities, and this port and the land bridge project will be act as the consolidated and reconsolidated in these areas, and also the bunker service. Because you may know that once the big ships has already arrived, so it will generate the supply chains on these activities, including the bunker service, which is the refill of the big ships, and also the food process, and also the accommodations of the people who works in the ships. So it means that not only the land bridge itself, also it can also generate the chains of the facilities and the chains of the services within the areas. Then we are going to reshape the supply chain networks and the logistic system and hub and spoke networks for the shipping lines. So there will be another alternative route for the global shipping lines to use the land bridge that we are going to develop, not only for the transshipments, but also for the assemblies and also for the imports, export into these regions. Okay, to reach the potential goals, we have to look back into the failures in the past that the port and the logistics centers are considered as two completely separated functions. There is no connectivity between the two of them, which it has proven to be uneconomical in the past. Now we move on to the present, that the new port concept that we are going to develop, it should be based on the environmental impact. But in the future, trends that we are going to develop for these land bridge projects will be the provisionals of value-added service behind the port areas, included free trade zones with diverse functions such as logistics center-oriented port, like Singapore ports or many ports in Japan, or the production-oriented port, such as Kaohsiung and many ports in China, which will develop the concept of the Thailand Bridge projects as the transshipment port to be logistics center, and in the combinations of the production-oriented port in the futures. To reach that potential that we are building that strategies, so the functions that the land bridge model, it will be served for the first tier as the import functions, that we should have bonded warehouse, de-stuffing facilities, loading and unloading facilities, and also the first tier for the export functions, it need to have the bonded warehouse, stuffing facilities, loading and unloading facilities. And for the transshipment purpose, we need the terminal storage for the first tiers. And in the second tiers, there will be domestic distribution center for import, international distribution centers for export, and also multimodal transport from vessel to vessel, or vessel to rails or trucks for transshipment purpose. And the third tiers that will be developed from these Thailand land bridge models is the manufacturing and value-added service and other support activities, shipping business such as the bunker service, the maintenance service for big ships. This will have to be induced into the development models. Okay, to summarize what we are now, the strategy of the land bridge project will include, first, the promotion and the development of the competitiveness in the logistic distribution transport, which concerns cost and time, competitiveness, and routes and group of countries which potential to promote and support the projects. Secondly, the promotion and the facilitations maritime business, which is to promote maritime related businesses such as bunker service, maintenance service, or insurance services. Thirdly, the development of the port industry and the domestic industry cluster involving regulations and the industrial promotions policy of Thailand, the development of potential industry for land bridge and related industry. Because we found that within Thailand, there are some regulation which is one of the obstacles on the import-export or the investor that want to do any business in Thailand. There might be some regulations which to retard or to prevent some activities that it cannot be used. It cannot, the investor cannot start the business in Thailand. So we are looking on that soft side and to change some regulations to introduce or to make it more interesting for the investor, which might from the global or also local investors are invited to join in these projects. And last but not least, the investment promotions and the privileges, including policies on benefits in Thailand and abroad, such as the tax incentive, will be looked at during these studies. So those strategies have to be developed and synergized to make the Thailand's land bridge projects become possibility and reality. So those are the recent information that the OTP have already have already reached for the 4 months studies, and we are doing on the Landbridge project. As I mentioned on the first slide, that this study is still going on. So the input information from the stakeholders, the private sectors, and also the public's participations will be benefit for the project's development. And thank you for your participation. And you can see the further information of this project can be looked from the project website, which is written here, worldwideweb.landbridgethai.com. So we are going to post the further information, what we have got from the studies, to share the information through this website. Okay, that's all of my presentation today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sukolrat. If you have a few more minutes, we have in the chat some questions from the participant. I will help the participant to address to you. I will try to be quick because I know you're very busy. But in the meantime, thank you very much for your time and extensive presentation. So among the first questions we have, the first one is about the connectivities. If the connectivities between the port, railways, road will be shared with others or dedicated only for this project?
Okay, once we are developing these projects, so for example, on the Landbridge, we are going to develop it as the motorway system, but also in some areas, we will have some kind of the service road that the people who are living alongside this project can share this road. But the main lines will be as the motorway system. And also during our business development models, we will know how could we designate the railroad to be as for this project only, or the others can be share the railways also. Because in reality, you know that not the track will be used 24 hours. So there might be some slot which will be free, because when we use it as the transshipment port, so some free slot, the investor can be share and can be share these tracks for the public purpose as well.
Okay, thank you very much. Another question from one of the participants is related. The shipping line are not so interested in allowing their containers from Ranong port to South China via Laos. Easy to lose track of equipment and end up in place that need repositioning with consequentially charges involved. Is this practical point taken into consideration and discussed with stakeholders? Example, shipping lines.
That is good information, because one thing that we're thinking that there might be some regulations which do not allow us for some activities. So in this study, so we will have some kind of the the suggestion that this information will give to the government to amend some regulations to allow to allow the liners from internationals to do some business within the Thailand. So everything now, we will study what is the obstacles, and then we will have the report to submit to the MOT itself and also to the cabinet that we need to allow this thing or these things to make it happen. Because as I mentioned, that the Landbridge project is one priority of this government. So I mean that if they want to make it reality and to make it possibilities, so they might do some things to attract the investor, to attract the liners to use these projects. Okay, and this information is very important. It's very important to us. Thank you.
Thank you. And please let me know if you still have some time, and don't worry, I will drop also from the chat some other question. The next one is, what is the success rate of similar kind of transshipment port in other parts of the world? Is it something that your bureau already studied about?
Based on the information that the land bridge in other countries is kind of very long routes. For example, there are 2 land bridges in the world already, but it is kind of the linkage between, let's say, in the United States, for example, those 2 ports are very long routes from eastern coast of the state to the western coast of the state, which can be, I'm not sure, it can be considered as the land bridge, but it is not in the same scale of what we are doing now. And also another route is to connect from China to European countries. And also, when we talk about the land bridges projects in the world, so it is very large scales. But now we think that in our land bridge projects, what is the possibilities? And then we are going to promote these possibilities, not only because when we talk about the land bridge, it's not only to use as the transshipment purpose, you know. The land bridge projects that we are going to develop will give us back the development of the areas. Then the liners and also the investor can use the areas for the related businesses, something like for the assemblies, for the automotives. Those things will happen. So it means that we do not look at the land bridge project as just linkage between east side and the west side. Okay. So that may answer your question.
Thank you very much. And proceeding in the next one, in order to make this a true success with foreign investors, it is imperative that Thailand has to open up their services sector, including logistics services. Right now, it is not attractive due to a regulation which needs to be overhauled. This does not seem likely. How you see this change happening in the future?
Okay, so there's also good information. And I think our consultants will collect this information and how would that trends to be moved onto in the future process. Okay, and I think that during development of the projects, and we can share the answers to that. Okay.
Thank you very much. And something that is more specific regarding the goods that are receiving sea freight in Thailand. We have that currently up to 1/4 to the transit time from Italy, for instance, is due to the transshipment in Singapore. Will this project improve the transit time?
Okay, according to our records, if the goods from European countries go through Ranong port instead of going through Malacca Strait, it will reduce the times for about 2 days. But also, we are not going to look at just only the time that can be reduced, because one thing that why the ships go to Singapore port, because in Singapore port, you may know that they offer the bunker service. For example, like refueling the ships. Okay, one thing that we are going to attract those liners to use the Ranong port is mean that there might be some mechanisms to lower the price of fuel that the large container ships or also the ships that transported from European country can have the bunker service in Ranong ports. Okay, so that are not only the times that you can reduce, but also the services that we are going to develop in these areas to be as good standard as the Singapore ports. That is what we are aiming for development of the land bridge projects in the futures.
Okay, thank you very much. Also, the next question is very similar, is still related to the the time that can be saved if transshipment at Ranong Chumpon for a container moored to Europe Asia route, considering transshipment time, port congestion, navigation. Do you have a forecast of the time that can be saved if this land bridge is in operation?
Okay, as I mentioned, we can save about 2 days,
2 days.
if we just divert it from the route through Malacca Strait to use the land bridge projects. But the main thing that we have to develop in this project is the automation, because you know that sometimes if we use it as the transshipment port, so it has to have the double handling, that you have to pick up the containers from the ships and use the rail transport and then pick up again through another ships. That's why we are looking at the development of these projects using the automations to reduce that time for the transportations. And also, as I mentioned earlier, not only the time that you can save, but we will add some more information, some more business, something like value added things to attract, to give the benefit for the liners to use the land bridge instead. And also, as the forecast in my presentations, that the congestion problems will be worse and worse in Malacca Strait. So this route will be an alternative route that the sea liners can be used as another choice of the transportations.
Thank you very much. We approach probably the last question of this afternoon. It's related again to law and regulation. Currently, the law and regulation related to the transshipment process is not very efficient comparing to the neighboring countries. Is there any plan to change the related law and regulation to facilitate and make more competitive Thailand in the transshipment process? Probably yes, I believe.
Okay, so there's a good point that we are looking at on this regulation as well, because you may know that now the government is trying to something like to resorting the regulation. Some regulation is outdated, and some regulation is some kind of as the prohibitions of the doing business things in Thailand. So the government of Thailand and also they are looking at how could they improve that regulations, something like to, as you mentioned, that to make it more efficient for the future investment and for the future other countries, other global investor to get involved in the investment in Thailand. So we are looking at this point as well in developing these projects. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I believe it's very competitive in ASEAN with the surrounding countries. So yes, today we have several professionals in freight forwarder, shipping company. So your presentation, Dr. Sukolrat, was very, very insightful. And if you allow us, we can share it with among the participants as soon as your office will coordinate with our office. But in the meantime, I would like to thank you very much for your time. And we do not have any other question from the public at the moment. But of course, we facilitate for all the participants to be in touch with your division in case they would like to ask some more information or perhaps becoming investor as well. So I think for this afternoon in Bangkok, it's all. And thank you very much again for your time. And I would like to thank also the Minister of Transport and Dr. Sukolrat for being with us this afternoon.
Okay, thank you very much. And I would like to thank all the participants to join these sessions, and also your questions will be very, very informative and very important for us to develop the land bridge projects to be, as I mentioned, that we want this to be reality and possible in the futures. And also if you have any further questions, so I think you can contact to our teams.
Absolutely, we will facilitate for the participant to be in touch with your division or either way, they can contact my office and we will liaise with your team.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much. Have a good afternoon or a good day and a good start of the week, everyone. Goodbye.